And there's over 3 million Americans that have this disease. In the United States, it took up to 10 years average to be diagnosed with this. But yet, if you were over in Italy, it took the time between you presented with the symptoms, and went to your doctor, it took 2 to 3 weeks. It was like light years.
Hi friends, this is Read and Write with Natasha podcast. My name is Natasha Tynes and I'm an author and a journalist. In this channel, I talk about the writing life, review books, and interview authors. Hope you enjoy the journey. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. Today, I am very happy to have with me author Margaret Mary O'Connor. Margaret has been called the modern-day David on many occasions. On a mission to reveal carefully guarded secret of the Catholic Church, she unveils the truth through her well-researched writings. She is author of Scandal in the Shadow and The Journey of a Celiac Soul. Margaret Mary is a force to be reckoned with. So, Margaret, I'm so happy we're here to chat, and I have a lot of questions about you, about the book, about your writing journey. So, without further ado, I'm gonna give you the floor, and I just want to ask you about the book here that I enjoyed, and you thankfully sent it to me, and it's called Journey of a Celiac Soul. And if you can tell us what is this book about, how did you decide to write it, and the publishing journey in general. So
Certainly. But first of all, Natasha, thank you very much for having me on. It's really a pleasure. The book that you just saw there shows a dove. And unless you really look at it closely, you will see the host, the communion host. And my book deals with not only the physical side of an autoimmune disease, but as well in this case, the spiritual side of one's religion. And it's called Journey of a Celiac Soul, S-O-U-L, A Second Chance at Life. And it's basically my journey living 20 years with an undiagnosed autoimmune disease called celiac disease. And I wrote it not only for individuals that live with this disease, but as well, more importantly, for their family members or friends that just can't seem to get a hold on what this disease is all about. And I think, Natasha, if I took a survey of hands, if I could see the listeners' hands, and would ask them, what do you think celiac disease is? Unfortunately, many would say, oh, that's that fad diet. And the confusion comes in because it's called a celiac diet. And of course, what do we associate with the word diet? We associate weight loss. Okay, very briefly, if you have this disease and you eat anything made from wheat flour, what happens? Your body sees it like an invader and they develop like a response against it. And this immune response basically ends up tearing away at your own intestinal lining. And being a person with celiac disease, you can eat and eat. I'm talking about great amount of food, and yet the value content of minerals, vitamins, none of that is being absorbed. So what's happening within your body? It's called malabsorption. Your body is basically starving. And I'll tell you from personal experience, that is no fun way to lose weight. But this diet is there to help save your life. And that's why I can't say enough. You have to realize that this is an autoimmune disease and it's nothing to do with the fad, because we basically are at the mercy of a restaurant owner, their staff, that when we ask questions about our food, we don't want to be poo-pooed like, oh, that's not going to hurt you. And then even going back to family members, when you think of it, I mean, what is more natural? If you've lived all your life and you've taken in wheat, that's the bread of our life in a sense. Well, then how all of a sudden can that flour be basically life-threatening to you? And that's really this whole issue, is that we have to stay away from wheat. And obviously that's easier said than done. But okay, what does that mean when you get a call from your doctor? I got a call from my doctor, and he said, now, Margaret, you will never, ever again be able to eat your regular breakfast foods, your toast, your bagels, your waffles, your French toast, your pancakes, your donuts. And then he went to lunchtime. Soups have fillers in them. And again, bread, whether it's white bread, wheat bread, Italian bread, rye bread, pumpernickel bread. And then we moved on to dinner. And your hot dogs, you have to watch out for the fillers in them. We can be in there. And then just your hot dog roll, your hamburger bun, anything, soy sauce. You have to watch in creamers what's there. Even in coffee, down to your little coffee pod. Where I live, we have Wegman stores around, and they're wonderful. They list everything, gluten-free, lactose-free, vegan-free. So it really helps. You're not reading every ingredient. But their coffee pods are gluten-free, because what happens is, if you don't have a distributor that you know that there's no wheat around or anything, wheat can get into your coffee. And we have a coffee, I'm trying to think now, it's eluding me, Tim Hortons. They have delicious coffee. If you go into their restaurant, their regular coffee that you drink there is safe. But if you bought their coffee pods, they are gluten-free. So there's just so many hiddens that you have to watch out for.
So why do you think it was important to tell your story in this book, especially now? I think, as you mentioned, people with, many people are, eating gluten-free diets. And as you said, people would just assume it's just a fad and it's not a life-threatening disease. So I want to know, was that the reason that compelled you to tell your story, or you wanted to focus on how it affected your faith? So I just wanted to know what was the reason.
It's physically how it affects me. But, getting back to celiac disease is one aspect of individuals not being able to have wheat. But then there's everyone else, even yourself sitting there. Perhaps you have a wheat sensitivity, and that's called non-gluten celiac sensitivity. And there's 21 million people that have that. And the thing that's bad in one way is, if you have that, you normally don't feel the symptoms. Like if someone has celiac disease, you're going to definitely have alarm bells going off in your intestinal area. If you've ever had awful food poisoning, or perhaps come down with some type of a stomach flu, you know what I'm talking about. So for celiacs, that's what they are experiencing. And it's just not the idea of, okay, I go out to a restaurant one evening and I take in gluten. It's just not that night that I'm experiencing that. The damage stays in one's system anywhere from 2 to 4 months down the road. And it's that inflammation that's behind any autoimmune disease, whether it's celiac disease, whether it's arthritis, whether it's lupus disease, diabetes. And that's the hidden, that you can't see the damage that's being done. And yet there was a wonderful doctor that, thank God, he came over from Italy, Natasha. He was a pediatric gastroenterologist. He started at the University of Virginia. Now he's at Mass General. But the research that he brought, when he was over in Italy, he would see many children every week when he got over here to the United States, they warned him, now, you're not going to see like celiac children like you do in Italy. Say, okay, 1 month went by, 6 months went by, a year, and he wrote a paper. Where are all the celiacs in the United States? And he was able to get from the Red Cross blood samples. But because of the confidentiality laws, unfortunately, he was not able to tell them, you have celiac disease. And there's over 3 million Americans that have this disease. In the United States, it took up to 10 years average to be diagnosed with this. But yet, if you were over in Italy, it took the time between you presented with the symptoms, and went to your doctor, it took 2 to 3 weeks. It was like light years ahead. And the damage that you're talking about, I was within 5 months, my doctor told me, of being 6 feet down in the ground.
Oh.
So I am just so wonderfully excited to still be here. But seriously, my sister had brain cancer. She never had a second chance. And this doctor, Alessio Fasano, says, if you're diagnosed with the disease, the reason that you have to stay on what they call a celiac diet is because you will die slowly, but you will die. So you have to decide, and I think as an adult, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's very stark. Are you going to just keep cheating and eating what you used to eat, foods with wheat? Or are you going to stay off of that and then have a good life, except for the times that you do ingest wheat? But with children, it's a whole other different thing, because the reason, again, I wanted to bring out to listeners here that don't have celiac disease, if you're a neighbor of someone that they have children that have this disease, again, you have to realize the damage that's being done within their system by having them over, and you're thinking, oh, come on, just a little wheat, just a chocolate chip cookie, that's not going to hurt them, like be the devil.
Yeah. That's interesting. And now I feel bad because my friend has celiac disease, and I said that maybe a few times. That's okay, just a bite. And now I understand that no, it just the bite is problematic.
Yes, I'm the celiac police.
Yeah, no, but that's a very valid point, that there's a huge difference between gluten sensitivity and a deadly diagnosis, like celiac disease. And for me, I want to go back to the book. And do you think your message about the importance of recognizing, diagnosing celiac disease was, sent through this book? And how did the readers react to it, especially that you tied in your own religion with your own diagnosis?
Well, it's really helped in a sense that way back, the actors and actresses, they were the first ones that got on this diet. And unfortunately, it gave it that fad diet, thing. But it was the best thing in a sense, because then all of a sudden your big food companies, your General Mills, Pillsbury, they all started making celiac food. They didn't want to really help us. They helped themselves. I mean, seriously, these companies are millions of dollars, and they could see, hey, this is a new source. So for someone like myself, it was a godsend, because I'll tell you, the first company that I ever had their food, oh my God, the bread would just basically, if you didn't toast it, it would fall apart. And, we can laugh about that, but it was really sad. Now, I'm trying to think, the part about this is, okay, if I have this disease, obviously I know, and I'm trying to impart, we have to watch out for the damage it can do, life-threatening damage. But what about your everyday life? What about the psychological perspective of it? We know the worst loss in our life is the loss of a loved one. We lose a job, or for some reason we lose our car, we lose our house. Well, for a celiac, you've just lost your most universal enjoyment in your life is eating. And I was diagnosed when I was 38. So, I mean, every day I was just used to, in my cabinet, there would be Duncan Hines brownie mix. There would be all these delicious mixes. And I remember getting off of the phone with that doctor, and he told me, about I wouldn't have this and that. And I happened to look over, and there was a cabinet open, and I could see all of these mixes, and it hit me. I felt like I was in someone else's kitchen because all of a sudden, all this food, it's just something that's completely foreign to you. And there is grief associated with that.
Mm.
You never think of it that way. And there was a wonderful book written by William J. Warden, and he had different steps to go through grief. And obviously it was associated with the loss of our loved ones, but there was to accept the reality of the loss. So when I first was on this diet, I went about 4 or 5 months before I started to feel good. And yet every day I could see my other family members, the food on their plate was what I used to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no issue at all. But it was when I started to really, into 4 to 5 months, start to get my health back, my weight back. I'll tell you, one day, boy, did I see their plates. And it was like a voice in my mind, oh, come on, just a little bite of that. Yeah. So you really have to accept that reality and realize, hey, come on, you're an adult. You want to be sick? You want to go on with your life, and enjoy life, to make that decision. And then there's also to really experience the pain of grief would be to experience the pain of this food loss. If you're in your own house, and again, you have other family members there, all you have to do is open up the refrigerator and you're going to see what you used to eat every day. You open up the cabinets, like we had to have separate shelves, where I put all my product and then their product was somewhere else. And even in the refrigerator, my containers were all labeled. You go out to just the convenience store and there's food in there. It would be, I think, like if you had the disease of alcoholism as well, you're surrounded by alcohol. Mm. You're in your home and you're watching a TV show. There's a bar scene maybe, or you go out to a movie, and what do you see? Whether you're a celiac, you see a restaurant scene in the movie, or if you have alcoholism, you'll obviously see they'll be drinking. So it's in a sense, it's like that 24/7 that you're surrounded, whether it's the celiacs being surrounded with food or someone with alcoholism, they're surrounded by the drink, the alcohol will be there. So if you don't really address these issues, you're going to be a very negative person, or you're going to basically go into denial, which basically is going to take your life because you'll just keep, consuming.
Yeah.
And like, how do you adjust to this environment in which what you knew is gone? So it's like, it's a continual cycle. And if you're an adult, thank God, you should be able to make that differentiation, but it's very sticky if you have children, because you can, I sound like a tyrant, you can rein them in when they're little, but seriously, when there's that peer pressure, when they go out to school or wherever they go, they'll be made fun of. And there's even shows, Disney and different shows have actually had things that they think it's funny, and they make fun of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book was published a few years ago, no? Like a couple of years ago. And what kind of feedback did you get, either from those with celiac disease who already read the book, or just others who are interested in the topic? If you can tell us. There was
a lot of relatives. I think it was very interesting because they finally could, I think, really understand. And that's my point. Because if let's pretend you're a relative of mine
Yeah.
and we're going to obviously be at each other's houses or whatever. If you don't understand all the components of this, you could make something up for me, and obviously it could have gluten in it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even think of that. And even going out to a restaurant, there was this one restaurant, I won't mention it, but this was the most craziest thing I ever heard. And thank God the waitress told me. She said, "Do you realize they put pancake mix in the eggs because that will make them all more fluffier?" Well, who would ever think? You would think, and you know what I'm saying? That's just one illustration.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
So the book, I just want to talk about the publishing, your publishing journey. So this book was self-published, correct?
Yes, I had, unfortunately, oh my God, I had went a few years where I tried to do it, I guess, the old way that you send out the query letters.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, you get to a certain point, it really isn't the best psychological experience when you get letter after letter after letter back. And basically, they were all the same form letter, that it just doesn't really meet our company's needs, or maybe this should be just in a magazine. But there was not one really bit of like personal encouragement.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided I'm going Amazon.
Yeah.
I know it's pretty straightforward, and I can do this, and yet I can have it presented to a large market. And that was the reason that after all of those letters, a rejection, yes. And then beyond that, there would have been the extra step of getting an agent.
Yeah.
And before, obviously, I never had to take that step because I was never approved by any big publishing house. But that really made me think, now, wait a minute, who knows my book more than myself? And why should I have to have some agent? And they might think, oh, celiac disease, I know that disease, or whatever you're writing about. Obviously, they will never know it inside and out. They won't have the same passion.
Okay.
And I sort of decided that just, to me, didn't make any sense. So in a sense, it was neat because I sort of avoided that. And that was another reason why I went rushing to Amazon.
Okay. And how did you market the book? How, in this podcast, we like to help aspiring authors as well, give them tips. So where, I got to meet you through a podcasting service, and this is how I got to meet you. But in general, I'd like to know how you marketed, you're marketing your book.
Well, that was the whole reason that I ended up being a guest on podcast shows. Okay. Because I thought, this is a medium, obviously a whole medium to actually reach listeners out there.
Yeah.
That might be intrigued, by the concept. In this case, I'm writing about celiac disease, or in my other book about the hidden history of women priest in the church, Catholic Church. And so now, if I could add that I am going to start my own podcast in the future.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes. Your Radical Truth.
Focusing on the Catholic Church or on celiac disease?
On both. On both. But first, it'll be more on this hidden history within the Catholic Church's history that is based on biblical research. And that is so, I find that intriguing because I love history.
Yeah.
And whether we look back to the Titanic, remember when that little submarine went down and all of a sudden there was the Titanic, and then we saw that debris field. Those were all objects of people back at that time. So in a sense, it's the same. Unfortunately, we don't have that sort of research going back into first century Israel, but we do in the sense of with biblical research, where through archaeology, that scientific study where they actually study the monuments And then there's the epigraphy where they study the inscriptions and even to the various writings. And this is where you find, in a sense, these hidden skeletons that have never really been presented before. But I really believe as a woman, why shouldn't a woman deserve the truth? Why shouldn't she understand that, yes, back in the early centuries of the Catholic Church, there were women priests, there were women deacons, there were women apostles. And the most famous woman priest is Mary, Mother of God. And she was known as Mary Priest. And her model was, she was the model for all priesthood in the Catholic Church.
And that's the focus of your second book, correct?
Yes. Scandal in the Shadows, meaning not scandal regarding Mary, meaning omission. The omission of Mother Mary. Back until 1927, Mary retained that title. And then it was in that year that the Catholic Church hierarchy took that title away from her. Oh, wow. And of course, this is all sadly hidden within our church's records, because my own mother, she lived in the 1920s, my grandmother, and yet, of course, they never heard of this. And they have an excerpt from a Roman official that's thanking someone in a newspaper that ran a very small article. And basically they're saying, well, isn't it wonderful that you took care of this question in your article? And it's a question that many people wouldn't be able to understand. And I'm thinking, well, yes, as a woman, how can you take away Mary's title? And some people will think, well, wait a minute, that's Jesus's mother, so maybe this was like an honorary title. The Catholic Church, in order to call Mother Mary a priest, they went back to Hebrews 7:26, and they said, isn't it fitting that we have such a high priest? And Mary, there's a wonderful book by John Vingegaard's The Ordination of Woman in the Catholic Church. And he said Mary was a sacrificial priest. So what does that mean? That means that Mary presided on the altar. She as well did the consecration. And then beyond that, handing out communion and ministry to other people. So she's a real everyday woman. She knew the toils of the time. I mean, they weren't a rich family. Seriously, she had to go out and get the water. She had to make the meals. I just love it because it's a whole other side to Mary.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Actually was a woman. They even referred to her as a woman bishop too.
Oh wow, that's really fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading it as well. And this takes me back to an issue that you raised in your book, which is a big part of your book, is the effect of celiac disease on your spiritual life, and especially when it comes to communion. And I know that some churches now, they offer gluten-free communion. And do you think that would just solve the issue for people with celiac disease? Or what was your experience? And I would love to hear about your experience when it comes to
sure.
Yeah,
because I know that's so hard. Originally, back when I was first diagnosed, the Catholic Church just had the regular wheaten host. Okay. They didn't have a low gluten-free communion. Okay. But this gastroenterologist that I mentioned, Dr. Alessio Fasano, said, even for individuals that are very sensitive, that low gluten communion will not be acceptable for them. And I'm one of those individuals. And there were a group of ladies in our church that we just were ecstatic when we heard the Catholic Church was coming out with a low gluten communion host, because now we could, go up and receive communion. And of course, we all got sick after we took that communion host, because it just, for our own bodies, that was just too much. And that is why this is like, to me, it's like a hidden issue, the church has come out with that low gluten communion host. And I believe that was back in about 2003 or 4.
Yeah.
And the issue is all taken care of. And I was very lucky. I had a priest from the very beginning. There was a little write up in the New England Journal of Medicine. So I gave him that. And then he allowed me to put a pyx. It's a little round container that you carry host in, like whether you're a priest or a Eucharistic minister, to take host to people that are sick, in their homes, hospitals. He allowed me to put that up on the altar and put a gluten-free food in there. And then, of course, at the consecration, that was changed. And if I could be the devil's advocate, when you think of it, even though there's a priest up there in the name of Jesus, who is giving him the power to do that? It's Jesus. So in the sense of when the priest does that consecration over his communion dish there, and as well, if any other Eucharistic ministers, there would be other pyxes that the normal host would go in. It's Jesus that's making that determination. And this priest it was just wonderful. He said, would Jesus turn and walk away from you because you have an autoimmune disease? Would he give you something that would harm your body? So I was very lucky for years. I had several priests that did that. Then suddenly, back about 3 years ago, there was a priest that came in, an associate priest, and for 5 months, everything was hunky-dory. And all of a sudden, in December, he said, Peg, I can no longer give you your gluten-free communion host. And I was taken back. I said, what? He said, no, I can't do that anymore. And I said, well, who put you up to this? Because I figured if a priest everything is fine, and then we come to this 1 week in December, 5 years later, and he wouldn't tell me. And I said, Father, and then he says, I don't know you. I said, Father, you've only been giving me this for 5 months. And the Monsignor, he certainly knows me. He's been doing the same thing. So I said, Father, we're going to end this discussion here because before we both say whatever. So this was on a Saturday. So I called the rectory on Monday and I got a call back in my house on Tuesday. And I said, Father, let's just cut to the chase. I said, this is my spiritual food. And I said, you're basically letting me twist out here in the wind. And you've taken away my only opportunity to receive my spiritual food. I said, I deserve to know who made this determination, that's causing you to say now that you can't give me my communion. And he, this and that. And finally, he said, well, it's me. I said, what? I was just floored. He said, yes. He said, my conscience, I cannot do this. And I said, wait a minute. I said, Father, canon law was not created by Jesus. Canon law is church law. And I said, what did Jesus do? Jesus fed the poor. Jesus cured the sick. And I said, there's no way that I will understand why your conscience is bothered. You are acting in the name of Jesus. You should be helping me to be able to retain my opportunity to get weekly communion. No, he couldn't. So then he wouldn't explain. It was just that it bothered his conscience because it was the canon law issue of breaking not Jesus's law, but church law. So then, of course, I went to the Monsignor and I asked him, and I said, Monsignor, when I grew up in the 50s, I said, the Monsignor was in charge at the church. Seriously, you wouldn't have an associate pastor making a move like this. So I said, what are you going to do? He just looked at me, turned his back, and just walked away from me. So, that I can't even explain it. That really hurt me. Because here I've been in the Catholic Church since I've been a little girl in the 50s. And it's like a bad dream. I'm trying to understand. I did not commit mortal sin. I came down with an autoimmune disease. And that's the slap in the face that I get, that, I no longer can receive communion. And again, this just is not right. I mean, how is this? Our Catholic Church is a sacramental church, and we basically live through that sacramental church, and that we are able to, at communion time, to be able to receive Jesus.
Have you thought about changing churches? Maybe it was your local church and another church would be more open to that.
I know there would be other denominations, yes, but to me, maybe it's because I'm Irish, but it's the principle that this is wrong. And when we had Vatican II, there was different constitutions, and there was one actually on the laity. And it said that we as lay people have the right to speak out on matters of importance. Well, if this isn't an important matter, this just isn't right. And it takes me back when I first was diagnosed back in the 80s in Boston. There was an article where a little 5-year-old girl had celiac disease, and her parents went to a church, and thank God the priest was very open and she was getting her communion. Well, someone, of course, complained to the chancellery, and then when they heard that, that's a sacramental aberration, and you just can't do that. So, of course, they did leave and went to another denomination, and she's being taken care of. But I feel as an adult, Jesus understands my predicament, and I pray to Jesus. But and on the other hand, I'm just not going to turn around and walk away from this, because this is something that is just completely wrong.
So what happened? What's going on now? You cannot take communion now? You stopped?
Yeah. I'm not getting any communion.
Okay, and how does that affect you spiritually? The fact that you're not getting your spiritual food.
Well, in a sense, I think I'm closer to Jesus, because I've actually had to separate, in the sense, from, I go to other churches,
okay,
because I do love the Catholic Church, and I want to hear the Word of God. But as far as the spiritual end of it, that is my prayer with Jesus, because what used to be the most spiritual part of going up, in receiving communion, it's gone.
Okay. So in terms of the book, has anyone from the Catholic Church or from your church read it? And was there any reaction? Because you're being very vocal about this, and I'm sure maybe it might rub people the wrong way. And
well, there was one woman from church, was in her 80s, and she always came across as a very open-minded woman. So I thought, oh, this will be neat. It was around Christmas time, and I'll send her the book, as a gift.
Okay.
Well, I got a phone call. Peggy, what is this? And at first I thought maybe she was offended by the title, Scandal in the Shadows, the original priest, Mother Mary. And I said, I just want to let you know that scandal means omission.
Okay.
The omission of the Catholic Church from letting everyone know that Mary was a woman priest. And, I was so excited, because I thought, who would more be the best model for women in the Catholic Church than Mother Mary? But unfortunately, this woman she was just so upset. And I have to tell you, when I read that John Vingegaard's book, there's a chapter on Mary. And in there, when he was describing Mary as a real priest, I threw the book up in the air. And then I had to pick it up and I had to reread it, because I thought, did I really see what I saw? And then it was this excitement, this joy really dissipated for me, because then I had the awful realization that I had been betrayed by my own church. And after a few weeks, I thought, I got to get out of this awful feeling. And I thought, well, who better to follow than Jesus? He spoke out against the authority types of his time. And now I have this wonderful news that Mary, Mother of God, is a woman priest. So that really, in a sense, ignited me, that I wanted to get the word out, not only to women here in the U.S., but as well, whether it's in Ireland, Australia, Australia, rather, the Philippines, Africa,
Did you
Asia.
did you get any positive responses from people who read any of your book? Do you think there is hope for change within the Catholic Church when it comes to that issue specifically? Let's focus on.
It's going to take a long time because people really have to, particularly related to Scandal in the Shadow about Mother Mary. You have all these women, sadly, within our Catholic Church that have no idea of a real, proven from biblical research of Mother Mary's other side. So when I go out picketing, obviously I'm seen in a sense like a pariah. And, some people really will be very vocal and tell me, you don't belong in this church. You're a liar, and you're a hypocrite. You're a heathen. Go to that church a few blocks away. And it's sad because they're defending their faith just as much as I love the Catholic Church, but they miss this key finding. When we're in our Catholic Church, when you think of it, think of like, say, the left side of pews in the church, the right side. On the right side, for men, since the time they've been little boys, they've had the role models of priests. That's a religious heritage to them to follow. But over here on the left side, okay, well, we had Mary, but we never knew she was a woman priest. And then there was Mary Magdala. But really, where was the weekly experience of seeing a woman, whether giving the homily, whether, doing the consecration? We don't have role models like that. So there's this whole religious heritage that's completely wiped out for any woman in the church. And I think for mothers and grandmothers, you should really be concerned. Future Church did a survey, and they found that millennial women today are more often to be leaving the church because they have had it with being lied to, and they just don't feel their spirituality is being met. Because if they were baptized, just as I was baptized, you were, if you're in the Catholic faith, were baptized the same as little baby boys. It's the same prayers. It's the same anointing. That means we're supposed to be equal in this church. And of course, we're not equal, because if we get the call that we want to be a woman priest, well, obviously, sadly, within the Catholic Church, forget that. And I don't know if you ever heard, the Pope has his own commission. It's called the Pontifical Biblical Commission. Back in 1976, they looked at the question of woman's ordination in our church. And what did they emphatically say? They said there is no biblical reason why women can't be priest. Well, hello, that was 1976. So why are we still, in a sense, debating this issue of woman even being priest? And then you've probably heard over in Rome, they've had these different councils on women being deacons. Were they ever deacons? Back in 1974, it was proven from 3 Greek studies, women were on the altar in a church in front of a bishop. The same wording was said. The bishop prayed over them, placing hands on them, and they each received a stole. They each received the cup to drink from. Yes, and women were emphatically called deaconesses. So why in 2016, if the church would have only followed what they found back in 74, there never would have been the need to reconvene in 2016 these commissions now if women were deacons. It is just so sad, because the hierarchy is definitely, that evidence is right there. And they're not following it. And I think hopefully it's like a grassroots effort. I'm trying to have the listeners, if they hear this, spread it to their family and friends and relatives. Because why shouldn't women at minimum, at least be told the truth, this wonderful truth. And they should be up there. They should be able to be a woman priest. There were women priests. And even, don't get me started, Natasha, there were actually more woman apostles. We heard Jesus sent out the 12 men apostles, period. But there was this researcher, Ida Ramley, and she found this concept of apostleship. Okay, what does that mean? Who's an apostle? Anyone that's sent out by the divine one, that Jesus, or the particular community. And then when you get into biblical research, you start finding names of other woman apostles aside from Mary Magdalene. Yeah.
So this is really fascinating. So in terms of your future plans, so now you have the 2 books, and both of them, at least the first one, delve into the issue of your faith in the Catholic Church. The second one is focused completely on the Catholic Church. What's your third book going to be about? Is it you're following the same trajectory, or?
Yes, I want to write a third book, but I still, I'm just sort of, I know it's coming, but I really haven't finalized it.
Okay.
So I leave everyone in suspense.
Okay. Well, any final words you want to talk to, tell the listeners about, whether it's the publishing journey, whether about recognizing, the importance of food and diet when it comes to someone with celiac disease, or the importance of female priesthood in the Catholic Church? Because we discussed different topics.
Yes, those are all very high things of importance. So I really want you to remember, this is biblical research. It's not some type of a folly on my part. But getting back to writing a book for the authors that are new, don't get so taken by thinking, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Because in my case, I avoided what I thought. And now this shouldn't be for everyone, but really personally, I'm saying what I found the best was to go to Amazon, forget the agent, and then more importantly, just write from your heart. I mean, you're writing this topic, obviously, because no matter who the writer is, there's something maybe in there that's very personal to you, something that you want to expand the readers with the new knowledge. And in this case, especially with the Catholic Church, that there were women priests. So just go along, and you're the best person. Again, you're the best publicity, and get into podcasting, because as far as I can see, that really, in a sense, gives you more visibility. Try that, and hopefully that'll help you.
Thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
For me, I learned a lot. For me, what I'm taking out from this is I'm going to be extra sensitive to anyone who has food sensitivities. I'm not going to ever say just one small bite, you'll be okay. I think that's really important. And two, I'm just recognizing how this affects your faith as well. Like you're a Catholic, and you believe in your faith, and just how you have to deal with that. It's something to really to think about. And I hope someday that the issues that you raise in both of these books can be resolved, and we'll find a solution eventually. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Natasha.
And best of luck with your third mysterious mystery book that we're not supposed to about. And for anyone who's listening or watching, thank you again for hanging here until here and listening to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. And until we meet again.